Well, Scout, thanks so much for taking some time to hang with me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to have a chat with you.
Yeah. So I am really fascinated by your story, your journey. And we actually have just connected through email because you have pitched different podcast guests to me. And I didn't really know a lot about your story, but I was fascinated as you shared a bit with us. So you have had some mental health challenges, and so have I. So that's not and many people do, obviously. But tell me about when in your life did you start to experience some of those mental health challenges? When did you start to notice it?
Yeah, so I had my first depressive episode when I was 14. And my first boyfriend broke up with me. And then my mom got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis all in the same week.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yeah, and it wasn't as if this wasn't brewing, right? Like if you look back on my journals from 8th grade, you can see that I was already a very emotional child. And so I fell really hard. I started cutting myself, restricting food, throwing up if I did eat food, wearing sweats every day, not showering, just really letting myself go and entering into this very deep depression. And obviously, my school found out about the self-harm, and my parents put me into therapy, which I completely resisted as like a rebellious teenager until I finally found a therapist that I somewhat jived with. And it's interesting because my friends weren't in therapy. I was really the only one. I'm not, I'm 28 years old. This was like 2005. And even back then, that wasn't something that was super talked about like it is now. But I never felt any stigma or judgment. Maybe I didn't tell people. I'm not quite sure. But I went through high school like that. But it wasn't until I turned 20 that I was formally diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Okay. And so you were having depressive episodes, but then were you also having manic episodes where you were really flying high?
Yeah, so I am type 2, and type 2 bipolar disorder is when you lean more towards the depressive side,
Okay.
and the mania is actually hypomania. So it's just really subtle, it's not dangerous, and it's more just kind of you're in such a good mood that you forget about the dark times, and you just kind of like, so my pattern is that I get depressed every 3 months, and I go through like 3 months of depression, and then I come out of it, and then I go through 3 months of depression. So my mood just fluctuates. I don't rapid cycle. My cycles are a lot longer. And if you're wondering what type 1 is when you are more prone to mania, and mania is your main symptom. So I don't have so much experience with mania. I have
hmm
definitely, I have experience with hypomania where I spend a little bit more, I talk faster. I'm just like super pumped, which feels great. So yeah, I deal more with the depressive and psychosis side of bipolar.
Okay. And so what are all the ways you talked about therapy since you were, 14? What are all the ways in which you and your family sought to, find assistance or find help through this process?
Yeah, it's been a long time. I mean, I think in high school, my parents were really supportive of me going into therapy. But we didn't think it was a mental illness, right? We thought it was a teenager who was reacting poorly to her mother's diagnosis and just going through the trials and tribulations of hormones and all that good
hmm
stuff. So when you're in high school, it can be very easy to dismiss what's happening, emotionally during that time. And it wasn't until I left for college, I moved up to Berkeley to go to the city college up there, and I started having paranoia that men were following me home, that they were under my bed, that they were on my balcony, in my closet, in my car, waiting to come rape and kill me. And I would plan escape routes in my head of how I was going to escape. And it felt so real to the point that people had to check my car before I got in it. And that's when I started realizing, like, I don't think this is normal. Like, I'm losing touch with reality. And so I
mm
called my dad crying. I remember crying so hard, and him again thinking, well, it's your first year, away from home. My parents just got divorced. Maybe she's just, reacting to
mm.
that
Yeah.
emotionally. But it became very clear that my symptoms were not the regular, and I say regular quote unquote, but they weren't healthy practices that a mind should be going through.
hmm
And so that's when I started my journey of medication. And I have had a journey of 10 years on medication. And I just recently found the right medication, which we can talk about. But once I was diagnosed with bipolar, and the word was thrown around a lot between different psychiatrists and therapists for about a year before I was formally diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
Once it was diagnosed, I remember they said it was called manic depressive. And at that point, I didn't even know what manic depressive was. I mean, now the word bipolar is so thrown around. I thought my life was over. I thought I was a crazy person. This is it. I'm done for. I left college the next morning. Got straight on a plane home and dropped out of college and went through outpatient programming. But that's really when my family started seeing, this is a disease and an illness. And it took my dad a little bit of time to understand what that meant. And I remember my stepmom sending him articles to really understand that this was something out of my control. And once it clicked with him, I mean, he was always an amazing support. But then once it really clicked with him and he understood what mental illness was, he became my biggest advocate, advocating for me in doctor's offices and all that stuff. But it put a big strain on my family. Panic attacks on vacation in Paris where my dad has to escort me out of the building because I'm having a freak out, and just, I mean, sucks to say, but it ruins the mood,
Yeah.
So I, just quite frankly, but there was a lot of suicidal ideation and that my parents had to, deal with. I remember my stepmom wanting to drive over in the middle of the night to stay with me because she was afraid I was going to do something. And I was 5150 at one point. So there were a few years where my mom and my dad and my step parents were my core support system. And it was tough for them. Mental illness really hurts the person who suffers, but it hurts the people around them just as much.
Mm-hmm. My goodness. And so I assume they started putting you on some sort of antidepressant medication at some point and trying to get that, the right medication or the most helpful medication. I know it can be such a challenging, how many medications have you been on? You know what I mean? How did that journey play out for you?
Yeah, so a lot of people have great luck with medication and they go on one or two and it works for them. I was not the case. I lost count on how many medications I've been on. And not only did I go on so many medications, but I also had really bad side effects to a lot of them. So one of them put me in a manic state for a week and I went nuts for a whole week. One of them, I couldn't get out of bed till 1 p.m. So there goes working, right? One of them, I gained 25 pounds. Thanks, doctor. That was before my wedding. And so that kind of sucked. And then other ones made me physically sick. Other ones made me more suicidal. And so it was a really difficult time. And there was a lot of times in my journey where I was really anti-medication. I didn't feel as if it worked. I felt holistic measures were the best. And I just was sick and tired of doctors throwing something at me and then my body going through physical distress just for me to get better. I remember, couldn't even get out of my bed at 1 p.m. and saying, is this what I have to go through to feel better? This isn't a life. And I had a new psychiatrist because I switched health insurance and I went to go visit him and I was done. I said, I'm doing electric shock therapy. I'm done. I will go through it. I don't know how it's going to change me. I don't know what it's going to do to my brain, but I am done and I have no other option at this point. And he said, you haven't tried Latuda. And I said, and my old therapist used to talk about Latuda constantly. And I was like, okay, you're right. That's the one I haven't tried. So what? And he's like, let's just try it. And I tried it and it changed my life. And it is really, of course I still, have to keep my mental health in check. And over the years, since medication did not work for me, I was able to garner a set of tools that are so compact and so effective, which, I guess is God's way of making me go through that so I can be individually mentally strong. But thank God I found the medication that really works for me and has helped. I haven't had a depressive episode since July.
Good. And Latuda is specifically utilized for a bipolar diagnosis or for depression, or what is it?
I forget. I think it's bipolar. It's mood disorder and psychosis. I think
Okay.
A lot of it is the psychosis. So I deal with psychosis problems too. So it's a mixture. I think of mood disorder and psychosis, and then I'm also on Prozac with it, and we don't know if it's working, but we don't want to change anything right now. And then I take just those two for my mood disorder.
And what exactly is psychosis? How does that impact you?
Yeah, so psychosis for me is I hear voices in my head, and most of the time they tell me to kill myself. They tell me really, really bad things. They tell me to hurt myself, stuff like that. Sometimes they're I go through two different psychosis, which is interesting. Sometimes it feels like someone has implanted a thought into my brain that is not my own. So it appears as a thought, but I know it's not mine. I'm like, there's someone in my brain. And then other times I hear it audibly outside of myself. Mm. Mild hallucinations twice. And so, yeah, that's and then paranoia, losing touch with reality, thinking people are, attacking me, following me down the street, stuff like that. So that's what my psychosis looks like. And then I also deal with catatonia, which is when if I get too anxious over a certain period of time, I become paralyzed. My nervous system fries out and I can't move my body. And that lasts anywhere from 2 minutes to 6 hours to a month. So that's another, I deal with that's very rare for bipolar, but people with bipolar disorder do experience catatonia.
Wow. My goodness. I'm overwhelmed just hearing all this. It's amazing what you've been able to go through. And now that you're, finding your way, finding your path, being successful in life. This is awesome. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
Talk to me about the more natural ways that you've been able to cope with, challenges that you've had, things that you were doing. Kind of, you said this, I think you called it a compact group of tools or something like that were able to help you prior to getting some medication that was working for you. What do those things look like maybe in your daily life?
Yeah. So the first thing that started changing my life was my mindset. When I met my husband, who was then my boyfriend, he said to me, I don't care if you're depressed. I'll date you if you're depressed, right? Essentially. He said, I care if you're depressed and hopeless. I don't care if you're depressed and hopeful. And so I said, what would my daily life look like if I infused hope into it? What would happen? Just what would happen, right? And I started doing that. And then I started getting into support groups, which are amazing.
What did it look like though? How did you become hopeful in your daily life?
It gave me energy. I all of a sudden wanted to do things, right? So
How did you get it? How did you get the hope?
I lost so many things. I lost my college experience. I lost friends. I lost the normalcy of being a 20-year-old. I moved in with my parents. I lost jobs, internships, and I saw a man standing in front of me that, is now my husband. And I got to a point where I didn't want to lose that as well. And so that really gave me the strength to just start anything. And what's interesting, and I've heard this from other people with mental illness, I remember crying to my mom and saying, but I don't know what you want me to work towards. I don't know what it's like to live a balanced life that's not always in chaos and turmoil. So you're asking me to, look on a map and find a destination, but I don't know what that destination is. So how do I know the steps that I'm taking are the right ones towards the destination that you want me to get to? And that was very complex, right? So I left it up to faith. I found a higher power and I prayed a lot, and I did actually the 12-step program. You can do it for Depressions Anonymous. You can do it for stuff like that. Because my husband's almost 9 years sober. So he introduced me to that method. And I started just one by one, I started integrating gratitude. Every day I would write 3 things that I was grateful for. And then I started really getting into the spiritual and holistic practices. So for example, I go for cupping and acupuncture twice a month. It's a non-negotiable. It's amazing for my anxiety. I use essential oils. I meditate. I journal first thing in the morning. I wake up, I grab my coffee, I sit down, I journal for 1 to 2 pages. Just no judgment, whatever comes through. So that's been a really great practice. I use ashwagandha in the morning. I pray.
What is ashwagandha?
Ashwagandha is an adaptogen, and it's essentially really good for stress relief and mood balancing and creative energy. And I take it every single morning just to support that aspect of myself. So there's a lot of things.
How do you take it? I don't know anything about it. Like, educate me on it. Like what?
Yeah, I have it right here. You can take it in a powder, or this is a tincture.
Okay.
And I just put it under my tongue for 30 seconds to a minute in the morning. Okay. And it tastes disgusting. It's a dietary, it's really gross. It's an Ayurvedic antioxidant, essentially. And it says this potent elixir may support mood, creativity, immune strength, hormonal balance, sexual vigor, and stress relief.
Okay. There's a lot of benefits there.
It's an amazing thing. Yeah, you should take it every morning. It's incredible. So I take some of like Ayurvedic tinctures, stuff like that. CBD is really helpful. I'm into CBD, obviously therapy, working out. I read the Daily Stoic every morning. I do a meditation of the Daily Stoic every morning. I'm really big into Stoicism. So I have all of these routines and things that I do every single day, right?
Yeah.
Like every day, no matter what.
Yeah.
And sometimes that gets overwhelming. Like, why do I have to wake up, journal, manifest, then read the Daily Stoic, then take my ashwagandha, then put my orange essential oils on, then take my vitamins, and go through the whole day. And then if I'm anxious, then I got to go back to my journal and write. And then I got to, my night routine is I put my phone away and then I read for 30 minutes. It gets a little bit overwhelming, but at the same time, my life is so much more enriched. And in life, you have two options. You do it or you don't do it, right? So, the other option sucks. So I'll take this one.
You know what the other option is for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And you're going to therapy and you're taking your meds, which are, wonderful. Yeah. Amazing. I was up until 12 years ago, a total workaholic, and I had a buzz in my being that the only way that I didn't even realize I had a buzz, like a buzz, just kind of inside me. And it led to me funneling that toward work. And then I had a total meltdown, breakdown 12 years ago, and checked myself into the hospital for 3 days and just, getting my head straight. Was that your dog, I assume?
Yeah.
No worries. I just wanted
Is that
to make
okay?
sure. No, yeah, it's fine.
I didn't even hear that. I thought that was your dog. Looney, come here. Okay.
So I ended up getting a brain scan through the Dr. Daniel Amen clinic. He wrote a book called Change Your Brain, Change Your Life, and ended up getting on some anti-anxiety and antidepressant medication. And it has changed my life. It has taken away that buzz and allows me just to be present. And I still will go through seasons where I do feel down. Oftentimes, for me, it's connected to if I'm feeling a lack of purpose or purposefulness, in that particular season for whatever reason, in between projects or something of that nature. But man, I know, obviously I have not experienced anywhere close to all the challenges you've experienced, but it just feels good when you find a rhythm that works for you. It just feels so good. And I tell people that 12 years ago, I made a shift in my life where the number one value for me personally was peace. That nothing mattered more in my life than my personal peace. Because if I didn't feel peaceful, I wasn't going to have a good marriage. I wasn't going to be a good dad. I wasn't going to be a good business owner or, help anybody else in the world. I had to have peace. And it seems like weird. I don't hear other people say that, but I just know for me, if my mind is at peace, I'm good. And so I don't take on marketing projects. I don't take on clients. I don't take on any kind of thing if it's going to negatively, severely impact my peace. Like we all have to go through challenges, do challenging things that we don't necessarily want to do. I do challenging things every day that I don't really want to do X, Y, Z, whatever it is. But if I'm not going to enter into some sort of working relationship that somehow causes that peace to be jostled, because I know it's not going to be good for me mentally.
And that is such a gift, right? Like that's such a gift that you have. And I have the same one. But for me, the word is fulfillment, right?
Okay.
It's fulfillment. But there's so many people that can't be self-aware to understand that if something comes into their energy field and it affects them negatively, they don't understand where that feeling's coming from. Therefore, they do things that aren't in their highest alignment. Mm-hmm. But you and I have a very clear filter, right?
Clear.
We can look at things and say, no, that doesn't serve me. So I'm going to wake up at the age of 50 and say, I lived a good life because I knew what was good for me and what wasn't. And so sometimes you have to laugh and say, wow, like I went through all of that. Are you allowed to cuss on here?
Sure.
All of that shit to really bring me to a point where I knew how to live a meaningful life. And that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful.
Yeah. I have even had multiple situations in the last few years where I've walked away from monthly retainer money because it was impacting my peace.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say that could I have figured out a way to deal with that situation better so it would, I would be able to continue to be at peace. Possibly, but I wasn't in a place where I could do that at that point in time. So I'd rather be without the money and with the peace any day. And that's a hard decision. I see so many people, even coaching clients that I work with, you're stuck. You're chained to that money. You're chained to that job. You're chained to that boss. You're chained to that partner, whatever it is. It's like, well, but I am counting on this. And until you're willing to walk away from something, you may not find that peace or that fulfillment, as you said.
And that just says, and then if you think about it, if you walk away from things that don't serve you, that are ultimately unhealthy for you, opportunities are going to come into the door that are good for you.
Yes.
So I've walked away, same as you. I walked away from a deal because I felt as if my freedom and my stress levels would have been compromised. And it was good money, and I didn't do it. And then the next month I had my biggest month in my business with clients that really aligned with me. So people think that there's a scarcity of opportunities, right? So they have to hold on. If they get a client that's a big client, you got to hold on to it, because who knows if you're going to get a client the next day. But if you come from a place of the world will give me what the world should give me, you will find that you are in alignment with what you have right now. And your peace of mind, as you said, will be intact.
You said for you, the filter is fulfillment. What is that? What does that mean for you? Why is that so important?
Fulfillment is in the sense of waking up every day and being stoked about what I'm doing. Really feeling as if my cup is being filled with authenticity, with creativity, with something that I don't like the word happiness, because happiness is so fleeting and it's not something that we should be striving towards. Fulfillment is something I feel like really deep in my chest, right? Like under my heart, that really anchors me and grounds me. So everything I do has to make me feel alive and energetic, and yet at the same time calm and grounded, really like that great, beautiful balance. So I don't know why I didn't make the conscious effort to chase after fulfillment. I just realized one day how fulfilled I was by the projects I chose to take on. And I loved that feeling so much. And I felt that it was sustainable over a long period of time versus something like happiness. And so that's become kind of my word.
That's cool. So you have found fulfillment in lots of different ways, but I know a couple of years ago you started podcasting on your own, and you were doing other jobs and different things. Why did you start a podcast initially?
So funny story, I started a podcast because my husband was really into podcasts, and I lived next door. This is so weird. I lived next door to a grocery wholesale place that sold groceries to restaurants in San Diego. And they, for whatever reason, had a podcast studio that they opened up because they wanted to get into media and doing YouTube videos on cooking and stuff. And they were like, let's do a podcast thing. And I went in and I knew all the girls that worked there because I shopped there all the time because they were my next door neighbors. And I said, yo, can I get in there? And they said, yeah, we got one more spot left. Sure. And they were totally new. It was free. Like the whole thing was an experiment. And I got in there, and that's when I fell in love with podcasting. And I actually told my story of being bipolar. And right now I can tell it in a way that, I'm very calm and collected. But when I was telling it, I was bawling the whole time for an hour, and it felt so cathartic. And that's when I really started speaking out publicly about mental health. But I felt as if, and it's interesting because the work was being done for me, right? Like the studio produced it, edited it, did everything. And so I put in minimal work. And so I felt as if the return was minimal because my energy wasn't being put into it 100%. And I felt like I needed to shift and do something, and it was stale. And I was at the Ojai Valley Inn and Spa for my sister's birthday, and we were a little bit drunk off rosé and getting massages and totally being bougie and whatever. And I said, I don't have a podcast episode for next week. Do you want to go into the business center and just record on our phones? We ate truffle chips the whole time. We talked about The Bachelor. Like, it was so ridiculous. We were like totally tipsy. And I just loved being with my sister. And the energy was so infectious. And so 2 weeks later, I said, yo, you want to start a podcast together? and we started Okay Sis, which has been extremely more successful than I ever expected it to be. And not only that, it's given me a bond with my sister that is insane. And so that's really my biggest takeaway. We are so close, so close. And yeah, it's been a crazy, crazy ride with the podcasting.
That is so fun. And is she your only sibling? Do you have other siblings?
So she's my only biological sibling, but I have 4 step siblings. But they came into my life when I was about 17, 18. So she was the only sibling I grew up with.
Yeah. So it sounds like by starting your own business, and I just want people to know it's called Scouts Agency, right? Which is so funny because when I first got an email from you and I saw that the name was Scout Sobel, I swear, and now is Scout your real name? That's my first question.
Oh, if I had, if I told you, I'd have to kill you or something. No, I'm just kidding. It's my nickname. It's my nickname, but I won't tell you my real name.
Because when I saw the email, I thought, wait, is that the name of the company? Is that a person? Like I was confused for a bit because it fits perfectly. Like you're scouting out. I mean, it was just such an alignment. It was crazy. So how has this idea of the experience of starting your own PR agency impacted your mental health? Like, has that helped it? Has it hurt it? How has that been for you?
Yeah. So I was known as the girl who started and quit things. So I had a magazine, and then I was the director of operations and founding member of a women's digital media site. And then I started a blog, and then I started a podcast, and then I started another podcast, and then I started working for my mom, and then I started Scouts Agency. And I always knew that I was an entrepreneur, and what entrepreneurs do is they try out a bunch of things to figure out what sticks. And I knew something was going to stick. And my motto was fail as many times as you can and as quickly as possible so that you can reach success faster. And so the one thing, and I don't really, put too much thought into what other people think of me, but the one thing that I think hurt me the most was that my family wasn't sure that I could start and finish a project and have it be financially successful and not just quote unquote a hobby. And so when I started Scouts Agency and the money started coming in, that's when I really gained confidence in myself as a business owner. And so the main thing Scouts Agency has given me is a large amount of confidence in myself, in my capabilities. I'm competent, because my biggest fear is being an unfunctioning member of society due to my disorder. And so with Scouts Agency, I've proven the exact opposite with that. And so that fills me with such a pride, a personal pride, that, I just revel in myself. But it's also held me accountable, right? I have clients, I have payroll to make, I have a rent to make for my office. And so on days when I might not feel my best, it's not just about me. There are other people in lives and that are counting on me to show up. Yes, I'm not doing brain surgery or, feeding the homeless necessarily, but there are people that are counting on me to deliver. And so having that accountability and that responsibility that falls all on my shoulders, it's not just like I can quit a job and that my boss will go on and find a replacement and the company will continue on. If I don't continue on, Scouts Agency is no longer. So Scouts Agency and I are one in the sense that when I breathe, it breathes. And if I stop, it stops. And so that kind of relationship I have with it really gives me a sense of purpose. And the fact that I've been able to execute on it so successfully gives me a sense of confidence, not only in my business acumen, but in my mental strength capabilities that I can do something like this.
So good. So we will have links to your website, your agency's website, your podcast in our show notes. Of course, people can find you on Instagram at Scout Sobel, which is awesome. So we'll link there. But if somebody's listening today and they're struggling, they're struggling either with their own mental health or, maybe they felt like they've started a bazillion things and haven't been able to keep going or something, what would you want to say to them? What encouragement would you share with them today?
My main thing is you set the standard for your life, not society, not your friends, not whoever you think you should be listening to. You set the standard for your life. And if you set the standard high and you commit to that standard, your life will follow along. So find it in yourself, even though it's dark and even though it's discouraging and you don't understand where your life is going, find the standard that you want, right? That you want to live by, and little by little inch towards it. And it will come to you eventually if that's what you're holding high over your head. And my main thing is, if you ever say, well, I'm in a job, but this is just for now, or, I'm depressed now because I'm doing this, but it's just for now, I'll get out of it. That's you setting a low standard for your life. So show up for yourself. If no one else, just show up for yourself. Block out every single noise you've ever heard, your family's opinions, your friends' opinions, your spouse's opinions. Set the standard and reach toward that standard every day.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scout. I'm inspired by your story and your life, and I love you're making a difference in the world, right? You're providing incredible value to your clients, and not only to your clients, you provide value to me by, connecting me with people that I maybe don't know about or wouldn't have the connection to. So you're providing all sorts of value to the world, and my hope is that feels super fulfilling for you in the process. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure connecting.